Welcome, everyone. We're going to give it just a minute for our participants to all get into our Zoom room. But thank you, everyone, for joining today. We'll just watch the number kind of creep up, and once it levels off a little bit, we'll get going. Right. So we are recording the session today, just as a heads up. But I would like to thank you for joining us for Conquer Your Careers, CPG and Brand Management. And today we're specifically focusing on the topic of what it takes to connect with consumers. My name is Tony Phelan, and I'm a program manager for MBA programs at Forte. I'm delighted to be joined by 4 accomplished MBA alumni. Caitlin is a brand director at Jinx. She holds an MBA from UT Austin McCombs School of Business, class of 2016. Amanda works as a marketing manager in global strategic marketing for Johnson & Johnson, and she's a Cornell Johnson Graduate School of Management alum from 2021. Jess is a senior brand manager of North America Personal Care Upstream Innovation at Procter & Gamble. She is a 2018 MBA alum from the University of Wisconsin School of Business. And Christine is a senior strategy manager in global foods at PepsiCo. She received her MBA in 2020 from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. So panelists, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll get the conversation started by briefly getting to know each of you a little bit more. So Caitlin, let's start with you. Prior to going to McCombs for your MBA, you worked in corporate finance. Can you tell us more about yourself and your career path, particularly what made you want to switch gears and go into marketing?
Yeah, definitely. I was a finance and Spanish major in undergrad and started my career at Dell here in Austin, Texas. I started in a very traditional corporate finance rotation program. So you went through different rotations. It was really structured. Dell is obviously a huge global company. It was an excellent way to start a new career, especially having that really formalized sort of path and training program and everything. But after a few years within the finance space, a lot of the work is really sort of back end. It's a lot of reporting, traditional FP&A. And what I was really starting to feel like was I can report the numbers, I can tell you what I think the numbers will be, but you didn't really have a sense or an opportunity to impact the numbers and to actually drive growth and drive revenue. And so that was something for me as I was transitioning to business school was really, really important and kind of why I wanted to get out of the finance space and into something that was a little bit more top of the P&L focus. So around, driving growth. And so I went back to McCombs. So I stayed in Austin. So I've been in Austin since 2010. I'm still in Austin. But when I entered McCombs, I was really a little bit agnostic. So I'm happy to speak to that experience as well of not totally knowing what you wanted to do. But I was really focused on going into a business that was more consumer driven because that's just more meaningful to me. I didn't really care about like servers and storage and all of those tech things, as well as, working for a smaller company. I'd done obviously the really, really big company before. So I was really looking for smaller opportunities. That said, I have great things to say. And I think there are great options within some of the really big companies and big CPGs as well. But I transitioned after business school into really traditional brand management. I started as an associate brand manager on the Skinny Pop brand, so Skinny Pop popcorn. At the time, we were known as Amplify Snack Brands. We were publicly traded based here in Austin. Skinny Pop was the biggest brand. We had a few other small brands. And then we were acquired by the Hershey Company back in 2018. So have also seen sort of that transition from standalone company to M&A activity. And then I left Hershey/Amplify not quite a year ago and have gone more of the startup route. So I currently am the brand director at Jinx, which is a dog food and wellness company. We just closed our Series B funding. We're only about 17 people. So I am a team of 2. Kind of running all things marketing. So happy to chat more about that as well.
Great. It's great to have your perspective here as someone from a smaller company. So thanks, Caitlin. Amanda, let's head over to you. So please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career journey. What made you decide to go back to school and get an MBA?
Thank you for the question. I so I started out, I knew when I went to undergrad that I kind of wanted to go into business because my parents were in business. Um, my dad worked in marketing and my mom was an accountant, and they talked about their work a lot. And it was always about like people and solving problems. And I loved that, but I also was a very creative, like precocious reader as a kid. And I loved to read and write. And I didn't know how to bring that together. But when I went to undergrad, I did a dual degree in marketing and English from University of Maryland. And I realized that that was kind of the perfect spot for me in business because it's very like, it's the people focused part of business and it's communicated through storytelling. And so I went into, gourmet cheese. I started my career in marketing as at a gourmet cheese distributor. And then I realized to be a better marketer, I needed to get sales experience. So I went into account management for the same company. And I loved learning about the products and like getting into the science of how the products were made. But I wanted to get more leadership development and growth opportunities. So I went to Kraft Heinz, where where I did account management and sales. But when I was at Kraft, I realized that like I knew I wanted to go back into marketing and manage brand strategy, but I didn't want to work in consumer because it didn't feel as impactful as I wanted my day-to-day to be. And I wanted to work for products that were very connected to the customer, the consumer. And it was my patient journey as a patient of Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical drugs that got me interested in healthcare. And I went and learned a lot about healthcare marketing when I got my MBA at Cornell. And that's how I like kind of went through a convoluted journey to get to med tech and the orthopedics company at Johnson & Johnson.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Amanda. Did I accidentally mute you? Were you done?
Yeah. No,
I'm
but
so
I
sorry.
was done. Yeah.
Okay.
That was great.
Okay.
Good timing.
Yes. So thank you for sharing that personal connection too. That's really interesting. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about that. So Jessica, onto you. You've been a marketing professional throughout your entire career, and after 6 years in news media, you went back to school. So please tell us about that decision and share a little more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today, first of all. So yeah, my background, I, always kind of knew I wanted to be in marketing. I loved kind of similar to what Amanda was talking about, kind of that juxtaposition of business and kind of the art and science of marketing always spoke to me. So did my undergrad at DePaul University in Chicago, also did a dual degree in marketing and Spanish. And then ended up at the Chicago Tribune in their brand marketing function, which was kind of the best job anyone could have living in Chicago in your mid-20s. I was in charge of our entertainment and nightlife brands, so very fun job, but it was very marketing communications focused. And as I continued in my career, you started to realize in news media, the product is journalism, the product is the paper. And you don't have a lot of product input. You don't have a lot of strategy input. You're not making the financial decisions. So I knew I wanted to be a more strategic marketer and be more involved in the general management side. So I actually had a mentor at Tribune who came from General Mills and now has started her own food company. But she noticed my interest and really encouraged me to consider going back to school, which was not really on my radar. I just thought I would kind of follow the marketing communication path. And the more I learned, the more excited I got. And I was very focused on brand management. So I ended up at University of Wisconsin. They have a very focused marketing program there. But I just knew I wanted to build and develop my skills, and the brand, the CPG, like I wanted to get as traditional as I could. I did kind of news media, which is very non-traditional in a marketing sense. So wanted to get some more of that kind of product development, product innovation, general management experience. So that's why I picked University of Wisconsin, because the program was very kind of hyper focused on that. So I had a very kind of narrow view. I was open to other outside of CPG. I did explore some other companies and some other opportunities, but kind of knew this is where I wanted to be, at least in this stage of my career, and how I wanted to develop and grow my skills.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I love hearing that a mentor kind of pushed you in that direction. That's great. All right, Christine, let's get to know you. So you started off in the consulting world, but during and after business school, your career kind of shifted to health and wellness, innovation. So we'd love to hear more about you and your background.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So yeah, my career, I started in consulting, and I always really loved the functional side of consulting. I love working with a team to solve problems, and I've been in consulting for about 5 years. And actually, it's kind of a funny story. I had a manager every time at my career planning, and he's like, "We need to find that thing you're as passionate about as you are about food." And I was like, there's never, in the field I was in, I was like, there's never going to be that, because for me, a driving force in my career is I really love the food industry. I love food culture, sustainability, where does food come from? And as you mentioned, health and wellness, when you eat it, what does it mean? So that's really been what has driven my career choices. I really want to shape the food industry, and there's a lot of changes in that. So I decided I'd get my MBA, pivot to the food industry. I actually wrote my MBA essay saying I wanted to work in strategy, not really realizing that traditional strategy roles, I think around when I was applying, there weren't as many of them in the food industry. But then through my MBA, got to intern in brand and some strategy at Starbucks and Kellogg, and confirmed, like, I love this industry. This is where I want to be. And actually, when I graduated, I was planning to do off-campus recruiting and work at a smaller CPG space I was really excited about, and graduated during the beginning of COVID. And so since I was off-campus recruiting, happened to find strategy roles because those typically are more ad hoc. And so started my career in food strategy, so full circle, ended up there. And I really did enjoy it. I think you got to combine a lot of the consumer lens with my background in consulting and strategy. So I was at McCormick, the spice company, worked on our health and wellness strategy and innovation. And then at the time, that was like more of a middle-sized company, and wanted to be a little more into food culture, and had an opportunity to come up at Pepsi. So I joined the global foods team 2 years ago this summer. And that has been working. So in strategy, it's kind of a mix of, we'll talk a little more later, I think, about the role, but a little bit of like consulting where you have projects, but they're a little longer term. You get more into the consumer. I get to work cross-functionally with brands and insights and finance. So really enjoy that in my role. And I really love the focus in strategy and getting to find my interests.
I love that you get to combine your passions with your work. That's really cool. Okay, so we are going to dive into our predetermined panelist questions, but we will have some time for audience Q&A at the end. So attendees, if you have questions as we go, please add them to the Q&A feature rather than the chat, just so that they don't get lost in the chat, because we all know that can happen. But yeah, let's dive right in. So I would love to hear a little bit more about a typical day in your role. I know that that's probably not a super typical day, but maybe just give us some insight into what you kind of do on a day-to-day basis. And more importantly, how did you know that this type of role was a good fit for you? So we'll start with Christine, and then we'll go to Jessica after that.
Perfect. Yeah, so I cleaned it up a little bit. So I'm typically working on 1 to 2 strategy projects at a time, kind of similar to consulting, except our projects are longer. So maybe I work on a project for 3 to 6 months. In my typical day, I'm probably leading a cross-functional team. And so we might have, meeting together where a lot of my work is around framing problems and setting us up, doing initial viability and feasibility assessments. So that's a lot of what falls in strategy. So a lot of work with my cross-functional partners. At Pepsi, at least, strategy does also work a lot on leadership updates. So typically there's always one of those going on, where we're presenting and sharing information to our C-suite. So we're really involved in that. And I guess how I knew it was the right fit for me is I found the role is a really good combination of my interest in food culture and food innovation. So I usually get to work on where is the company going in the food industry, so shaping one of those projects. There's also a lot of project management, execution, and strategy, which is a strength of mine. So I get to combine my interests and strengths, so that gives me energy, and I've really enjoyed that part of the role. So that's a little about what strategy looks like day to day.
Great, thank you. Jessica.
Yeah, so my title may sound a little ambiguous, but my role, I'm seated in the basically new product development and innovation team for our personal care business in North America. So the projects that I'm working on are typically 3 to 5 years out and require a lot of product invention. So I'm in personal care and cleansing. So we focus on basically anything neck down, not deodorants, but think body wash, bar soap cleansing, hand and body lotion. So anything really that impacts body skin. So there's a lot of technical development. So it tends to be very research and development and formulation, work with chemical engineers, very technical heavy. But my role, similar, in a lot of brand, I think the continuity is you're working with a team of cross-functional. So still kind of the hub of that wheel and working with all the cross-functionals and understanding all the pieces. But my role is really driving the projects forward from a consumer point of view. So I'm in a lot of consumer research, really getting to know kind of what's happening with consumers, how are they using products, what are the trends, what are they looking for, trying to solve the tensions that they have. So my typical day, it's usually rooted in some sort of research. We're reviewing research, we're talking about research, we're talking about methodologies and what's next. I'm also kind of the voice of trends in the category. So I'm using a lot of corporate resources for trend hunting. I am using TikTok a lot. I'm using Reddit a lot. So using kind of like hi-fi and lo-fi ways to really bring in those trends and paint a picture of what's happening for our technical teams so that they can go ahead and identify what is the invention that they need to do to really solve these consumer problems. So it can get very nebulous. I'm working with scientists. I'm working with people who have dedicated their career to learning about the mechanics of body wash or bar soap. And it's fascinating, but it's really hard to get them to articulate what that means for the consumer. So that's kind of the bridge that I play. So learning a lot. This is not a typical, there's definitely upstream innovations across P&G, but it's not, a typical brand management role, but it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. I think I like the brand management function in general because I do like being that hub of the wheel, taking all kind of the disparate pieces from your cross-functional partners and telling the story. And I really get to do that in this role, that I play a vital piece of the puzzle into articulating the story so that when we take this invention that is very nebulous and 3 to 5 years out, how do we go and give it to brands like Secret or Old Spice or Native and help them articulate that for their consumers? So it's really exciting. There's, with 3 to 5 years out, it sounds like it might be moving slow, but the body care category is moving very quickly. So it's a lot of fun and just, a different rotation than what you might think of from day-to-day brand management.
That's great. I like that analogy of being a bridge. That's really cool. So our next question is going to be for Caitlin and Amanda. So what are the challenges of a career in this area? And then what are some of your highlights or the benefits that you've seen of going into this area? And what are maybe some common misconceptions, things that people might think about being in CPG or brand management that you've kind of maybe seen the opposite happen or something different happen? So yeah, we'll start with Caitlin and head over to me.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, but it can be exciting as well, is, especially in traditional CPG, the brand team really is kind of, Jessica touched on it, like the hub of the wheel, and it really is responsible for most deliverables in some way, shape, or form. As you're thinking about product innovation or hitting your number for the year, like no one's going to go and say like, oh, well, the sales team, did a bad job in that meeting, or this deliverable didn't happen on this timeline. Like it really does a lot of the time come back to the marketing team to play kind of quarterback for a lot of those different initiatives, whatever they might be, versus other organizations. Maybe it's the finance team that really has kind of like the bulk of the responsibility for delivering the number, for example. So I think that is something that is a challenge. It's obviously there's a lot of upside with it. And so I think, but one of the things that I think can be a misconception about marketing or brand management is how broad it really can be. So, there's 4 of us here. We all have very different kind of roles and scopes and are all in brand management. And what I'll say is I think a lot of folks think that it really is just the comms piece, or a lot of people who aren't in marketing or aren't in brand think it's like, oh, you just like work on ads. And it's like, well, not really. I mean, that's part of my job, and that's probably the more fun part of my job, but that's not my job, and it's an ad agency and I advise and consult on it, but like, I'm not in there like creating photos and things that are going to run on TV spots. So I think that's a misconception. And I think the other piece that can be a misconception, but for me is a benefit, is, the comms piece of it is truly not my strongest suit. So brand management, there is a really big path to go into more of a general manager route. It really, again, is about quarterbacking the business. And so, everybody will typically start as an ABM, and then as you start to specialize, you may find divergent paths within that, which for me has been a benefit. I see myself down the road much more in a GM sort of president position versus a true CMO who's focused solely on comms. But I think there's a lot of different paths you can continue to carve out within the career, that I think sometimes there's some misconception there.
Great. Thank you so much. Amanda?
So I'll start with the misconception, and like in terms of like healthcare, marketing and brand management, where at least when I came into it, I kind of thought about healthcare marketing as being pharmaceutical. But there's like a huge spectrum of healthcare that ranges from like within Johnson & Johnson, like vision, so contact lenses, and all the way to like, orthopedic trauma where I work. And so there's a lot of different places between those two ends where you work with patients to varying degrees. And then the other misconception, I think, is that you have to have a science or a medical or engineering background to do this job. And we do hire a lot of former NPs, MDs, mechanical engineers, but really the difference, that what it actually is that you really just need to have more of a passion for patient care, and improving patient outcomes. And that can be from personal experience. And that's what brought me to the job that I'm doing today. And that, so one of the challenges of that is things move more slowly in healthcare. We're not using TikTok. We have a lot of regulations that make things move more slowly in terms of like just, the marketing communications, but also in new product development. But that also has some benefit. And so for me, the benefits and highlights are, like, because the healthcare industry in terms of like marketing has been a bit slower, there's a lot of room for innovation in just the way that we market, like how we connect with our surgeons and customers and patients. And like being someone newer in that industry, I can really drive change. And then the other benefit would be in the new product development process. Like you are able to get really deep into understanding how the product is made and like what the clinical need is. And it takes a long time, but you really learn a lot along the way and become like partners with your customers. That's something that I really love.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love hearing what the differences between the different industries. So that's really good to hear. So if somebody is a current MBA student, or if they're considering going back for an MBA, what can they do in their program to prepare for a career in this area? Are there any, courses or activities, anything that you all wish you did? So Christine, we'll start with you on this one, and then we'll go back over to you.
Yeah, no, I really like this question because coming into my MBA in recruiting, I'd come from consulting, and I thought that was really transferable to CPG. It's very cross-functional, you solve problems together. But I actually found when I was recruiting, it was hard to make it as transferable, or it didn't resonate as well. So what I found was really helpful, especially because I did off campus after graduating, was in my MBA, my internship was in retail, and then most schools have some sort of consulting project the first or second year. And I also worked in CPG, and I was really surprised when I was interviewing. I felt almost every example I provided was from one of those two experiences, because that's what they wanted to hear about, the experience in the industry, that, and less about my consulting experience, that really resonated a lot more with recruiters and interviews. So definitely take advantage of those programs to get a CPG under your belt. You can talk about it a lot when you interview. And then I think from understanding the industry, answering questions, I love my marketing classes. Second year at a lot of schools, a lot of them are very elective based. So I was taking half or 75% of my classes were all some form of marketing. And I feel like I really did learn a ton about the industry, how do you think about consumers? And it's definitely more educational in how it's structured, but you know how to speak the language, you can do that in interviews. So I thought that was super helpful. And then when it comes to interviewing, you know what you're talking about. You've had some experience, you've learned the science behind it. So definitely, I think if you don't have the experience, getting ACPG on your resume is super helpful for when you interview. And also, I think it confirms, like, do you like the industry? Do you like the space? And for me, it did. So I really enjoyed that.
So to answer the same question, I think that as a brand manager or marketing manager, you're kind of like the voice for your brand, and you have to work with so many different groups that, like, you don't need to be the one if you're considering business development activity, like, and maybe like an acquisition. You don't need to be the one to do the financial model, but you need to know enough about finance to have those conversations. And that's the same thing, especially with supply chain and operations and like forecasting, like those conversations. You're the central person to like communicate what's happening, but you have to be able to make those decisions. And so having really strong fundamentals in like just general management in your finance and your supply chain classes, like that's more important than you think if you're focusing just on marketing. And then for me, marketing, like fundamentals and marketing research were really important to help me both stay centered when I started my job, like remembering, am I covering everything? Am I really like managing this well? But marketing research, learning, getting exposure to that kind of thing really helps you ask the right questions, and like especially when you're working in like new product development, which is what I'm doing now.
Thank you both for those suggestions for people who are, maybe they're just starting out, maybe they're sure that they have an interest in this, but they're not sure how to make the most of their MBA program. So those are really helpful suggestions. Thank you so much. So I'm going to combine a couple of questions here, and I would actually love to hear from everyone on this. So first of all, and some of you have started to talk about this a little bit, but how do you connect with your consumers and make sure you're keeping up with trends? And then I'd also love to know your perspective on, do you really have to love the product to be successful in your role? And kind of anything you want to speak to around that. We'll start with Caitlin. Then we'll go to Jessica and then Christine and Amanda. But yeah, Caitlin, let's kick it off.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways to think about connecting with your consumers, and it's probably going to depend on sort of what area of the industry you're on. I'm sure my answer is going to vary like greatly from Amanda's in the healthcare side. From a more professional standpoint, there are lots of different ways when you get into a company that you can do kind of traditional consumer research. I really always love qualitative groups. So it's where you're getting a group of consumers in a room, asking them questions, even though it's not a huge number of people, just the insights and, the dialogue that you hear can be really insightful. But something that you can do sort of on your own is really like understanding your consumer, understanding what their interests are, and just following that on social, being of the trend and of the moment. Again, my consumer is, pretty squarely in millennial. We do straddle sort of a very equal gender split versus skewing one way or the other. So, it is important for me to understand the things that are happening in the world and pop culture and of those things, because you want to make sure that your brand stays relevant. I've worked on brands in the past where maybe I wasn't as squarely sort of the consumer. And so it's me, I was like following the WWE at one point because like that was important to our consumer. Like, do I care? No. But, understanding who they are and making sure you're knowledgeable about their life outside of just your brand. And in terms of, do you need to love the brand or not? I mean, no, but, I think there is motivation if you're in a company or at least a larger ecosystem of a company that you are aligned with the values, that is motivating to you. Like I didn't want to go work in, let's say, for Philip Morris, right? Even though an ABM role there versus an ABM role at Pepsi or Hershey or where I was maybe wouldn't have been that different. So that said, large CPGs, at some point, you're probably going to get on a brand where you're like, yeah, it's maybe the Knorr soup mix. Like, is this the most exciting? No. But does that mean that you can't do a good job or can't find value in connecting with those consumers? I'd say also no.
Great, thank you. Jessica.
Yeah, so I'll start with the loving the product you're working on. So from personal experience, I entered at P&G in a very different role than where I ended up full time. I was on the corporate coupon team, so very different from where I ended up on Olay body wash. And I was like, I can tell you, I was just not excited. I was a natural user. I was not super engaged in the personal care category at the time. This was 2018. Like the body care category is very different today than it was 5 years ago. I just wasn't excited. And I was like a little disappointed at where I ended up, in the big portfolio of where you can end up. And I think the mindset shift that I underwent joining P&G, and what we talk about a lot internally here, is falling in love with the problem, not falling in love with the product. So the problem is the job you're trying to solve for the consumer. And, at first it's like, well, it's body wash, you're getting clean, right? But then you start talking to people and you start learning about the impact that body skin has on their day-to-day, how they see themselves as a person, what clothes they wear, how comfortable they are being their full selves. They might have skin issues. They might be physically uncomfortable. Like there's so many different ways that a simple product like soap can help a person kind of achieve what they see. And like this happens in every product. Like you can always find the problem that you can fall in love with that impacts the person that you're working for, right? So that's how I've kind of shifted my mindset. A big chunk of my time is spent on bar soap. Not the most exciting thing in the world. So, but you can really find ways to fall in love with the problem and the strategy that you're trying to solve for if you can step away from the functional aspect. I think it helps, like we just mentioned, that being at a company that aligns with your values. So I had similar, thoughts as I was picking a company, looking at portfolio of products. So that helps. Like you don't want to go to work feeling guilty every day about the problems you're solving on your brand, but find something that aligns with your values, and then find that problem or that kind of nugget that you can focus on versus the functional product yourself. I think the other thing that I thought of when it comes to solving, falling in love with the brand that you're on, it may not be super exciting. I mean, that sounds exciting that I'm going to go work on toilet paper or paper towels or flour at other companies. But when you think about the big brands, that are behind things like Charmin or Bounty. It may not sound exciting on paper, but the resources and things you get to do as a brand marketer are really exciting. I don't know if anyone's familiar with what Charmin does from kind of an experiential marketing aspect. And like, yes, there's agencies involved, but it's really cool, really exciting work that I have not gotten to do on little brands like Ivory, like Ivory bar soap or Olay, that like, you know, today skincare may sound sexier than toilet paper, but they have the budgets and they have the resources. So it just depends, you know, you can find different things of what you like about the brand and how you can build those skills. I think as far as the other side of this question of how you stay in touch with your consumer, I totally agree. It's figuring out like what Caitlin was saying about, you know, what is your consumer's life like? I always take it from a media perspective. What media are they consuming? So when TikTok came out, like now I'm obsessed with it. But at the time I was very anti-TikTok and I had to bring myself around. Like, this is what my consumers are looking at. And now TikTok has changed the beauty industry. When I think about Old Spice, like I may not be on Discord or Twitch, but like maybe those are the media, Reddit, like those are the channels that you need to start thinking about. So what is the media that they're consuming? What are they being exposed to? And then, you know, find resources that work for you that you think kind of bubble up, like what's happening in the diaspora. So for me, the Skim, I really like the Skim a lot. I have some other creators that I follow. The Financial Diet, it's started by millennial women. She is finance focused, but it does kind of comment a little bit more on beauty and clothing. And so finding those resources that speak to your consumer that you can also find some enjoyment in helps get in their mindset.
That's great. Thank you so much. Christine, let's go to you.
Yeah, well, I'll just briefly touch on consumer because I'm a little less close with consumer, or it's very focused in my role. But I think, you know, Jessica talked about some resources. My advice would just be to really stay really close to the industry and the changes that are happening. There's so much happening with consumer changes, but regulation, what customers are doing. And so, especially too, as you're interviewing, there's amazing newsletter, podcasts. And I think staying close to what's the changes in the industry is always a good idea. And so I think that's always something that I enjoy, and then we can pull into my role a little bit. And then in terms of, do you have to love the product? I think Jessica and Caitlin said it really well. I think there's so many, like now I'm at Pepsi, which has really like huge brands, and they're really fun. And that's really fun about being at Pepsi. Very different than when I was at McCormick, a product that, you know, will like turn on the shelf, you know, a few times a year is very different than something people buy every day. But different I like Jessica, you said, like different problems to solve. And it was fun to be closer to like cooking and food culture in that lens. And whereas I think the Pepsi product is really sexy and it's really fun when they have the town, like I enjoy that part of it. I would say, yeah, I'd agree. Like, you don't have to love the products. I think if that's important to you, like that was something that I thought a lot about in my career journey of like, what are the products? What are we selling? I think it's something you can think about too with like the type of roles you do. What I've enjoyed about strategy is I get to focus a little more on where the industry is going. And so I'm really excited about the changes in sustainability and health and wellness. My projects tend to focus a little more, not always, definitely not always, but that's a little more the lens, and that's part of why I chose this path. So I enjoy the problems we're solving and where we're thinking about the industry, and how we're going to evolve our products to meet that. So that's something I thought a lot about. But I will say, I just add, like, what's really fun about CPG is the products are really, like, it's really fun to be close to consumers and products. People are so excited about it. And I think that's, no matter where you go, there you'll get that in some capacity, and that I've really enjoyed about the industry.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And Amanda, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, so you definitely don't need to love the product, although I do love my product. But you don't have to be the target consumer for your product to do what, you know, to work in CPG or brand management or marketing management. There was a advisor who came to Cornell when I was a first year, and he had been a CMO, and he said, like, if you are a marketer, you should be able to work with anything. It should be about like understanding and like delivering value for your consumer or your customer. And if that like, so that doesn't mean that you need to love exactly what you're working on. It definitely helps like to love what, you know, where you are, or like the team that you're on, or the company that you're in. Like I am definitely more mission, like a very mission driven person. And so like that like helps me when sometimes I'm wondering like, why am I in like working on our foot and ankle team with podiatrists and going to podiatry conferences. But like I think generally to like stay connected to your customers, like this is something you can do not even in, you know, healthcare, but like stay very connected to the sales and the field and get out into the field to learn from them. Like for us, that means like I'll go ride along with our sales consultants and like be in the OR when surgeons are like, you know, doing procedures with our products, to see, like, understand if they have challenges and what we can do to fix it. And like going to medical conferences or industry conferences and seeing what subjects are being covered, like that's the kind of thing that will help you stay connected. And yeah, I think that's it. But you don't need to be the target.
That's great. That's good to know, because not everyone can be. That's wonderful. Thank you. I know we're running short on time, so I have one more question, and this is an important one, so I want to make sure we get to it. How do you all balance the many competing priorities in your life? So if someone is looking at a career in this industry, what advice do you have for them for maybe finding that, I don't know if work-life balance is really a thing anymore, but how do you find that work-life integration? How do you make it work for you? We'll start with Caitlin and go to Jessica. And then Christina, Amanda, if you have anything to add on this, please do. But Caitlin, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really all about building credibility and leaning in when you have the ability, and then you'll usually get the grace to lean out when you need it. So I have a almost 2-year-old daughter. So, you know, obviously, you know, I didn't have children when I started my marketing career. And so, you know, what I did was just really built relationship, built the credibility to say, you know, I'm going to do things when say I'm going to do them, I'm going to get them done. I've worked now, I've had the benefit, the person that I'm working for now is someone who poached me from my last job because it's somebody I worked with before. And now I have the benefit of, you know, that person knows me well and knows, hey, maybe I'm offline from about 4:30 to 7:30 every day. And the way that my life is structured now, I'll get back on later at night and, you know, finish out the rest of the things or tasks and deliverables. But I've been able to do that by just being really consistent and committed. And so I think it's really in the times where your personal life is less busy, taking those opportunities to take a really big bite, and always staying consistent with your deliverables and timelines and everything. And then by proving that credibility, it gives you the opportunity to then say, hey, I'm taking PTO, like real PTO. I'm turning off my email, or hey, this is how my schedule is going to shift kind of. And usually people will be accommodating to do that. And the same thing too with like finding a company that aligns with your values. I think you need to find people that align with your values and can support that. So I'd say just really make the most of the time you do have, because then people are more generous with the time that you need away.
Great advice. Thank you. Jessica.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying I think balance and boundaries are important for everyone. Whether you're married, whether you have a kid, whether you have other things going on, like everyone should be standing up for themselves and their boundaries have work-life balance. That's something I was not good at early in my career. And now I find myself in a very different situation where I also have a daughter. She's 11 months old, but I also have a chronic illness. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a couple years after starting at P&G, and that really shifted my worldview on how I set boundaries at work and what you need to do. You know, you have to be able to perform at your peak, and you can't do that if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not setting those boundaries. So I've gotten much better at it with all the changes in my life, but I think that's kind of the first step. Like, be clear on your boundaries. Like, if you are super excited and passionate about work and that's what gives you like energy, which was me earlier in my career, I was willing to work a lot of hours. I was willing to take on the extra work. I could do all the little side projects and try and build that rapport. Now things are a little different. My boundaries are different, and I'm very clear with my managers and my team. You know, I log off at 5 and I can log back on at night, but the evening is time for me and my daughter. I don't work extra long hours because I have to prioritize sleep and wellness. You know, so there's being very clear, having regular check-ins, reminding them that, because they're not always going to remember. So like, you have to advocate for yourself. And then the way that I help support those boundaries, because, you know, boundaries are on you, you have to hold yourself accountable. Being relentless with prioritization. So having those conversations with your team, having the conversations with your managers, like, what are the things that you have to do to really deliver in your role? What are you being engaged on? Like, focus on the really important things, because they're always going to put more on your plate. There's always going to be a ton of minutia day to day, but really figure out what are the places that you need to make the impact, and putting the majority of your time and effort there. Like, you can't do everything 110%. So be really strategic about where you spend your time. And that's how you build credibility. When you start to deliver the high priorities, that's really when you start to get credit. And then finally, it's learning, and I'm still learning this, it's learning how to leverage your teammates and your cross-functionals. That's one of the pillars of being a brand manager, is you have a team of people that you can work. Really make sure that you're leveraging them to get the best work, and that, you know, you can delegate more. You don't have to do it all yourself. So figure out ways that you can better leverage the people around you and work with them more efficiently, so that they're contributing to the project, you're contributing. Because it, you know, in brand management, you know, it does tend to, you know, I think it was Caitlin was talking about quarterbacking. You do tend to pick up a lot of the slack if things start to drop off. So it's being very intentional about how you work with your team to make sure that as a team you are functioning and it's not all on yourself, because that's kind of when boundaries and things start to crumble. So yeah, it's a journey. Like, I'm still working through it and figuring out what works. Your life changes, you have to figure out new strategies, but I think it's important for everyone, especially as you guys start this career and maybe more demanding jobs. Definitely think through what your boundaries need to be for you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I don't want to cut this question short because it is so important, but I do want to make sure we have time for at least one audience question. And I'm going to, again, combine some because I'm seeing a trend. So if whoever would like to speak first, this is kind of up for grabs. If someone has minimal experience in this area, or maybe they are a career switcher, or maybe they're an international student who wants to work in CPG in the US, but maybe they don't have the background or the experience. We're kind of just getting a lot of questions about that experience piece. So I would love for anyone who wants to speak on that in your perspective.
I mean, what I'll say is you're going back to business school, or you're thinking about it, and if you're there, when people are recruiting on campus, like, they know that they are open to career switchers. That is something that is very common. And so I would say, within whatever program you're in, utilize that career office, utilize alumni networks, utilize people. But I don't think, especially larger companies, have a bigger ability to take and train, and they're going to have more formal development programs. I don't think they're not necessarily all looking for people that have come from CPG or come from brand and are going to do the same thing again. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have gone back to business school. So I will say, I think recruiters are more understanding of that than sometimes it feels. That said, it is harder at a smaller company, which is kind of the route that I took. But I think, you know, utilize the career office, but then utilize all of the resources you're going to have within your program. You know, folks are talking about consulting programs. Utilize your internship if CPG is a place you really want to be. If you get an internship at Kraft, even if that's maybe not your dream company, that's maybe okay, right? Utilize all those different pieces and resources that are available to you. But I don't think not having a background in brand or in marketing is going to exclude you from those types of roles by any means.
I can build on what Caitlin said, in that I was thinking about this question. There are so many roles in CPG, and some you'd be surprised to, like, maybe if you don't have direct brand, like at Pepsi, sustainability was in brand and now it's in supply chain. But you know, some people join brand through that, and then now they're a brand manager on Doritos. So, and what I really liked about Pepsi and a bigger company is you can move around a lot, and I think especially post MBA, those few years outside of school, there's a lot of room to switch in the company, and all these companies were always reorging, right? There's always opportunity to try something else. So that's one thing to think about. There's a lot of different functions in CPG you could explore. And I think one of the questions you had asked Tony in the prep was like how to stand out. And I'd say, you know, you can get experience in your MBA. And I think being passionate about, or doing your research, at least maybe not passionate, but now that I'm on the other side of interviewing, it really does stand out to me when someone does a lot of research on the company and they know about the products versus not. It's very obvious. And I think doing your homework, having some energy about it, I think it does really set you up into, maybe you don't have the experience, but you show you're willing to learn, engage. I think that really does help you a lot with the interview process too.
And I can just add one last thing. I think from my experience helping with prep with interviews when I was an MBA with the class below me and seeing what I see in P&G, because P&G hires a lot of career switchers. Like I'm probably in the minority of having marketing experience as background. It's about your skills. What are the skills that you can bring to brand management? Is it product management? Is it creative thinking? Like pull those out. It's less about the experience you've had and more about how your skills transfer. So really focus on that. You know, like Christine said, do your research, look at the company, look at how they value, and try and transfer your skills into that, and worry less about if you've managed an advertising campaign before.
I can just add one piece of advice, and it's the internal networking is extremely important to get where you want to go, especially if you don't know what that is. So if like for Johnson & Johnson, we don't we don't hire a lot of people externally, but we do hire a lot of people across companies, and like that's all driven by relationships. And when we have people who come from outside of J&J, it's really because they've like gotten to know a lot of people who have like worked at the company in different roles. And so if you're not at the company that you want to be, leverage LinkedIn and reach out to people and ask them for some time to get to know what they do. I didn't do that before I went to grad school, and that like starting to do that really changed my like ability to get my foot in the door to do something that I wanted.
Excellent advice. Always comes back to those relationships. So, well, thank you all so much. I'm gonna just share my screen again here so you can all, so the participants can just see a little bit more information on where you all are from once again. So there are some links and some websites on here if you all have additional questions about maybe learning more about careers at these companies. So I'll just for just a second if anyone wants to quickly make a note. We are recording this as well, so if you need to come back and look at it again later, that will be an option. And then make sure you connect with us on social, follow us on, it's at Forte Foundation is all of our social media handles. And then I wanted to point out specifically our industry resources on Forte's website. It's under the Career Center tab. So you can learn more about marketing, but also there's a ton of other information on other industries as well if you're still kind of undecided. Huge thank you to our panelists. This was super insightful. It was lovely to have such a broad range of roles on here that all kind of fall into that brand management, CPG area. So I think it really demonstrated the different paths that somebody could take if they have an interest in this world. And thank you to our attendees. I know we didn't get to all of your questions, but I really appreciate your engagement and your interest. And I hope to see you on future sessions. If you want to reach out to our panelists, I would say LinkedIn, like Amanda said, is a great way to do that. So if you have questions that didn't get answered, maybe you could try that. But yeah, it was great connecting with everyone. And I really hope that everyone has a great day and hope to talk to everyone again soon. Thank you.